My guest today is Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota and running to fill Senator Tina Smith's U.S. Senate seat, Peggy Flanagan. Great to meet you.
Thanks so much
Great
for
to be
having
here.
me. Yeah, happy to be here.
So you're running in a primary. We've extended an invitation to your opponent, Representative Craig. So we'll double back with listeners
Great.
when that happens. So I want to start with some national stuff, some Senate specific stuff, and then dig into some Minnesota focused questions, if that's cool. A lot of grassroots voters, a lot of Democrats feel like Democrats in Congress are not fighting hard enough against the Trump administration. I'm sure you hear this all the time. The pushback you hear from the House side is like, hey, we have no power. I think the senators would probably say, we just shut down the government for like 40 plus days last year. DHS is shut down now. Maybe that's a lot of fighting back in their book. Where do you stand on this debate? Are they fighting hard enough?
Well, I think, what I'm hearing from folks as we're traveling across the state is that people are sick and tired of Democrats fighting from a defensive crouch or governing by sternly worded letter is something we hear a lot about. And I think, fighting back can take on a lot of different tactics. I think, Senate Democrats leading on the shutdown really mattered, right? Especially after what we saw in the state of Minnesota with ICE, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more. But I also think it means being in the community, listening directly to people about how they are experiencing the Trump administration, what they want you to fight for when you're there, but also using your platform and then getting out into the streets. I think that also matters, right? We had over 50,000 people marching in downtown Minneapolis to show solidarity, but also to speak up. So there are lots of tools in our toolbox, but I just think people want to know that you're there for them, that you're fighting for them. And especially right now, when we see the influence of corporate PAC money, billionaires who have probably the biggest seat at the table in our politics, I think regular folks just want to be heard and want to know that when Dems come back into power, they are going to throw down on behalf of the American people.
Yeah, I definitely want to ask you a lot about the ICE and CBP occupation of lots of Minnesota and how inspiring the response was. But a couple more things. So, another flashpoint I think you hear with the left and center, a lot of places, is whether Chuck Schumer should continue to be the leader of the Democrats, whether Senate Minority Leader or hopefully Senate Majority Leader. Do you support Schumer keeping that job?
I'll say this. I feel the same way about Chuck Schumer that he feels about me. Uncommitted.
Mm-hmm. What does uncommitted mean? Because I've heard you say that before.
Yeah. I think we should have a
vote. Is this Minnesota nice saying no?
This is Minnesota nice, but it's saying I think we need a progressive champion to lead the Senate Democrats. And I think there's an example of a lot of leaders who are part of the group called the Fight Club.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've heard of this group, right?
Sure.
The number one rule of Fight Club is that we're not supposed to talk about it, but right, we're going to talk about it. So that's Senators Warren, Smith, Sanders, Heinrich, Markey, Merkley, and this group and Van Hollen, and this group of folks, I think, are pushing back and are not part of the Democratic establishment and are really looking for those progressive fighters. I think that's what we need, and I think that's what we're hearing from folks all across the country who are ready for more. And so am I.
It's interesting to hear you say focus on sort of the policy argument, because
Mm-hmm.
I think the other argument you hear is generational.
Yeah.
And there's, I think, ongoing frustration that we had this long, sort of tortured discussion about Joe Biden's age, and voters, I think, pretty resoundingly told us he was too old for another term. And yet the lessons learned have not translated to the Senate. Do you think there should be an age limit or term limits for the Senate?
I think what we need are progressive fighters, and I think there are folks of all different ages who can take on that role. But what I'll also say is, we don't have enough moms with kids under the age of 18 serving in the Senate. There's only 4, and boy, can you tell by the kind of lack of policies that have to do with paid family medical leave, childcare, making sure that, kids have access to health insurance.
They don't know who Miss Rachel is.
They don't know who Miss Rachel
Come on.
is. That matters.
Get it together.
Absolutely. I mean, and if you haven't been moved by an episode of Bluey, what are you doing serving in the Senate? No, but I think that matters, that our elected officials accurately reflect the communities they seek to represent, right? And so I think it matters that we have more young people who are serving in the Senate. I am not running to make history, but I think it matters that, we can elect the first Native American woman ever to serve in the U.S. Senate. That's healthy for democracy, and it's good. And I think now, as we're seeing these primary races across the country, that's good for us. It is good for the party. It's good for democracy overall. And having people feel excited and engaged about politics, that's something we should all want right now, especially as we've got Donald Trump in the White House every day.
Being great.
Yeah, just
Doing
doing
awesome
really, and this is my Minnesotan coming out, really interesting things, right? Every
Interesting
single day.
Donald.
Uh-huh.
Your crypto's interesting.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
Yeah.
and I just think it's an exciting time for our party if we choose, right, to lean into that excitement and not, get caught up with the status quo. We are seeing it everywhere. That people are demanding more. They want folks who understand what it's like, right, to try to stretch $20 through the end of the month. And frankly, I think if we had more people in the Senate who knew what that was like, we wouldn't have passed this big, ugly bill. So this is our opportunity, and I think we can reinvigorate the U.S. Senate and the Democrats who serve there.
You could certainly use some invigoration.
Yes.
Having worked there. After Watergate, after Nixon, there was a wave of government reform. That scandal didn't just take down the president, but it led to this fundamental reshaping of American politics because people woke up and said, oh, that was bad. Let's not do that again. Do you have a vision for what a post-Trump set of reforms could or should look like that the Senate should be hopefully working on right now?
We'll say a couple things. I think there are too many folks who think, oh, once Trump's out of office, somehow everything will be okay.
Yeah, we learned that one the hard way.
Right, absolutely. And we'll go back to, sunshine and rainbows. We have to be, I think, very clear about what the consequences need to be for Donald Trump and for folks in his administration, right? Investigations, criminal charges, what we have been through in Minnesota, there has to be some kind of reckoning. We also have seen, as Donald Trump, one of his first moves once he got back into office was getting rid of 17 inspectors general, right? And the very people who police fraud. He has enriched himself. He has enriched, his family. I think, one of the biggest things we need to do is make sure that you can't get rich off of serving in public office.
You're not going to bet on whether we're going to depose dictators in Venezuela and stuff on Kelshi?
I mean,
it's not your thing?
It's not my thing.
Okay.
I think, Kelshi is another interesting thing that exists, and we shouldn't be betting on our politics.
No. Seems
But
bad.
I would say, holding these folks accountable, making sure that you can't enrich yourself, and then I think we have to look at reforms around the Supreme Court as well, and just people have to trust the government again. And when I think about the opportunity to get in there, I think we will take back the House. I think we have a real opportunity to take back the Senate. And then everyone has to be really clear what their job is, right? What you got to be in role. So what is this senator working on? What is this senator working on? How are we building a base of support for the reforms, for the policies that we want to move, so that once, we get a new president in there, God willing, in 2028, thanks for knocking on wood, that we are then ready to go and rebuild. Because what we watched Elon Musk and, his Doge bros do to this government, we have to rebuild. And we have to do so with a lot of intention. So it is pushing for the policies that Americans want to be able to afford their lives and making sure that this authoritarianism that is just galloped into the White House and into Washington can never happen again.
Yeah. Do you think Democrats should get rid of the filibuster?
Oh, this is the tricky one, right? Because right now it's pretty helpful. But yes, I do, because there's so many things that have gotten, you know, stopped, right? Good stuff, right? And I don't want, Kirsten Sinema or Joe Manchin-esque people to be able to, stop progress because they're, bought and paid for
Yeah.
by big corporations,
Mitch
right?
McConnell.
Yeah.
What about the party saying, as a party, we're not going to take corporate PAC money, we're not going to take lobbyist money? Is that naive? Is that dooming ourselves to being outspent in every election? Like, what kind of campaign finance reforms do you think are appropriate?
I mean, I think the fact that corporate PACs and billionaires are running the show in Washington is a fantastic reason why we shouldn't take that money. I mean, for me personally, I have made that decision in my campaign, and I think it really matters.
Mattered a lot for Obama in '07, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
Really did. It was a differentiator.
well, because people get it, right? Like people understand it. And let me tell you, like, I knew the corporations had a lot of power in Washington. It wasn't until I ran for Senate that I actually understood just how much. And so,
How did you what did you learn in that process that kind of gave you that new window?
I mean, it's just looking at how folks are like, oh, well, that's too much, right? Or when you say, like, I'm for Medicare for all, right? People are like, oh, but there's so many folks in, the health insurance industry. Yeah. And there are people, a librarian in Canby, Minnesota, who's paying a $16,000 deductible and just paid $500 for a 5-minute med check, right? Like that's real. And so I just think that this is the root of why we are where we are. That big corporations, billionaires have their thumb on the scale in our politics in a real way. And what I would say is that I think this is the biggest contrast between myself and my primary opponent, Congresswoman Craig. This is where, big oil, crypto, big pharma, APAC is, they're all going to come in to this race. And for me, I can sleep at night because I'm not beholden to anybody but Minnesotans and I have integrity. But we also see in the Democratic Party as a whole, we should be the folks who are fighting to protect the environment, not taking money from big oil. We should be the folks who are anti-war, right? Not snuggling up, to AIPAC, who is A-OK with this war in Iran and what we see happening in Lebanon and Gaza, and the majority of Americans oppose it. And, when we see these big corporations and corporate interests who are keeping people who are making incredibly low-wage jobs, who are struggling, Democrats should be the folks who are fighting against that, not saying, please contribute to our campaigns. Because I think, it's Tommy, what you just said, like people get it. It's pretty disingenuous to say, I'm going to, regulate corporate, cryptocurrency on one hand, and then have your other hand outstretched and be like, but also, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, if you could pay for my campaign, that would be great. People are so much smarter than that. And so that, and I think that's coming for us, right? What we saw in the state of Illinois in their primary that they just had, my friend and my sister, fellow Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, crypto spent $10 million in that race. AIPAC spent millions, right? Yeah. And, I know that they're going to come into Minnesota too. But what I also know is that people are starting to understand why this matters, right? I've been endorsed by End Citizens United in this race. And I think the best way to get big money out of our politics is to demonstrate that you can run powerful grassroots campaigns that, are about the many and not the money, and you can still win.
You mentioned AIPAC and the big fight in the Democratic Party about U.S. support for Israel. Does that lead you to feel like we should be cutting off military aid to Israel? For example, I know Bernie Sanders has a bunch of votes this week to try to cut off specific funding of weapon systems. Like, where do you land on that?
Yeah, so if I was in the Senate right now, I'd be joining Senator Sanders in voting in support of those resolutions. And let me tell you that this was, a year ago when he introduced the resolutions with regards to offensive weapon sales to Israel. I was asked how I would have voted for that, and I said how I would have voted on it, and I said I would have voted alongside my Senator Tina Smith and Senator Amy Klobuchar in support of it, because the same values that I have behind making sure that kids can eat breakfast and lunch at school, right, for free, those are the same values behind supporting those resolutions. The suffering that we have seen is it's too much.
Yeah, it's off the charts.
Yeah, if there's tools in our toolbox that we can use, we should use them.
Agreed on that point. Let's turn to Minnesota. So some of Minnesota's neighbors, like Iowa and Wisconsin, have drifted right. Iowa, pretty far right in the Trump era. Minnesota has not. Why?
I mean, I think we really care about each other. And, we come from the state of Senator Paul Wellstone, and everybody knows, right, the bumper sticker, "We all do better when we all do better," which is, a famous quote from Paul. And I think people of all parties believe that in our state. We really care about fairness and looking out for our neighbor. And I think that's what you saw on display in the response to Operation Metro Surge. But I really think that that's what it's about, that folks just think you should be able to live a good life, make your own choices, and just feel successful.
Bottle up whatever you got in the water over there. You mentioned a couple times, Trump and his cronies have spent a lot of time attacking Minnesota, a shocking amount of time, right? Tim Walz gets targeted all the time. ICE and CBP descended on the state. There's this obsessive focus on Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, on the Somali community, allegations of fraud. Did it surprise you that Minnesota kind of had the eye of Sauron trained on it like this? And what has the impact of those attacks been on people who just live there, trying to live their lives?
So I'd say a couple things. One, fraud of any kind is completely unacceptable, right? In Minnesota, if you commit fraud, you're going to be, prosecuted for it. But I also want to say that if this was really about fraud from the Trump administration, they would have sent 3,000 forensic accountants
right.
and not, 3,000
not a CBP
ICE
guy
agents.
And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's right. And so the impact that this has had on our state, I know that, your listeners or your viewers probably watched the news and saw it and were horrified. But what people need to know is that it was so much worse in person. The trauma, the violence, the chaos, the things that people experienced. I have a couple stories that I'd just like to share with you. Like my little auntie, who, is in her 70s, was forced off the road by ICE. They surrounded her vehicle, and she's this cute little grandma. She rolled down her window, and she's like, "Hey, fellas, how can I help you?" Right? And they said, "Where are you going?" And she had a program. She was like, "I literally was just leaving a funeral. This is the program from the funeral." And she's like, "Am I free to go?" And they're like, "Yeah, go ahead." But she has a bumper sticker on her car that says Black Lives Matter. And she's like, "I'm pretty sure that was targeted."
What authority do they have to pull someone over in the first place?
Zero.
That's crazy.
Right? And this happened all over the state, right? We go to, I'm Catholic, so it's been a
Weird week, huh?
Weird week for Catholics, but I have to tell you, I've never been more proud to be Catholic in my entire life
It is
than
weird that
this
your
week.
suitcase depicts you as Jesus.
I know.
Your staff thought it was normal. I was like, I don't know.
No, I'm a doctor.
Yeah, I'm a doctor.
Yeah.
Have you heard the theory that thought he was told to say it was doctored, but then he said, "I'm a doctor"?
I believe
I
that
buy it.
theory 100%.
I saw it on Twitter,
Yep,
but I buy it.
absolutely. I think
Anyway,
that's
sorry,
probably
continue.
true. Yes, but
So you're getting run off the road. Your
yeah.
aunt gets run. Or your
and
grandma.
but you also hear stories, right, of individuals who were just stopped in the street simply because of the color of their skin. I'm Ojibwe. I'm Native American. We have a large urban Native population, and there were a lot of Native folks who are literally wearing their tribal IDs around their neck. I mean, it's outrageous. And the children, right? Liam Conejo Ramos, that the Trump administration, right, detained in Texas. They're now back, but they're now being targeted aggressively for deportation. The children, I talked to a second grade teacher who said, the biggest thing I have to figure out every day is, how I manage through children who are crying at different times throughout class. Like, it's horrific. And we go to a parish in North Minneapolis, and we've got a lot of mixed status families there. And church was so empty. And on Christmas, there may be 40 people. It's usually hard to get a seat, right? And so, throughout the occupation, we fed over 350 families. That work continues. People are afraid to leave their homes. They've been impacted financially in ways that I don't know if they'll ever recover. And what I can't get over is that there are going to be some children in our state who have an ACE score, an adverse childhood experience score, simply because there were federal agents in their neighborhood. I don't have another word for it, but I am running to avenge Minnesota and bring justice for our people. The drawdown, has occurred. ICE still has a presence. They're more insidious now. But this certainly didn't just focus on the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. As we were traveling across the state, we had a statewide tour. And at multiple events, people's phones went off because they were all, right, part of a group that was doing rapid response, where ICE was at a daycare center, where they were at a construction site or a restaurant. And so I think people are starting to try to get back to normal, but this has changed. This has changed us. And on Palm Sunday, it was packed. And there were kids crying and laughing and toys dropping on the floor. And it was like a lot of chaos. And it was totally beautiful.
Yeah, another good kid chaos.
Yeah, like it just, so folks are coming back, but this is the financial impact of this on our state, the emotional impact, the impact on mental health, the economy. It is unforgivable. And so what the federal government laid at our doorstep, they have to repair and heal and restore.
You think you spoke incredibly powerfully to the impossible to quantify emotional impact. I mean, I for every story like Liam, there's other stories we all read of like kids who were just didn't go to school for 3 months, hiding in their houses, and like the how we ever fix that, like how we ever be able to help those kids readjust and not be afraid. You also mentioned the just pure economic impact. I mean, I read that businesses in Minneapolis and St. Paul were reporting $300 million in losses. How do they recover from that, or how are you guys able to help them recover from that?
I governed under COVID, and we at least had a more of a partnership than an adversary, and had resources. And now, right, it's the folks who caused this chaos and violence and killed 2 Minnesotans, right, who are supposed to be the ones who are our partners in recovery. Um, I will tell you that we have watched Minnesotans step up in a major way. Mutual aid, people who are standing outside of daycares and schools, um, you know, in their neighborhoods, there's literally people who stand outside of our parish every Sunday just to make sure that we can worship safely. Um, the financial contributions have been incredible. Philanthropy has responded, but it's not enough. And at the state level, there are some things that we can do. I am hopeful that there will be some rental assistance that we'll be able to get past this legislative session. But we have divided government or tie in our House, and so that will be difficult. But the recovery is going to be long, and I think this again is one of the reasons why we need folks in Congress, and Senate who understand the need for investment in this recovery. We can start by clawing back the $75 billion that was given to ICE to terrorize Minnesotans.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah, it's a good place to start.
I like that idea. I mean, as you know better than I do, Minnesota has a reputation, a well-earned one, for being a generous place to live because of all the social services. And as I mentioned now, I mean, the Minnesotans are facing all these accusations of fraud, maybe up to $1 billion worth of fraud. Republicans are using those allegations, those instances, to try to undercut the entire concept of a welfare state, right? To suggest that all governments are corrupt and we're wasting your money, and why don't we just give a big tax cut to everybody, hint the billionaires, and claw it all back, right? How do you think we can fight back on those kind of attacks on sort of the kind of governance that you and I believe in?
For sure. Well, I'd say a couple things. One, like I said, the fraud is completely unacceptable. I'm a recovering executive director, and will tell you of Children's Defense Fund Minnesota. So people stealing money from the most vulnerable folks in our state makes me pretty angry. And so, the governor and the legislature have put in place policies to stop fraud, to prevent fraud. And I still have hope that this legislative session, there'll be more that's able to get done. Republicans have voted down several measures, right, that would be helpful when it came to combating fraud. And so I hope that their better angels will arrive and they will vote in favor of some of these policies, because I think
better angels like J.D. Vance.
Yeah,
you want him to come.
Our theologian, right,
Yeah.
J.D. Vance.
You mentioned going to church a few times. What do you think of J.D. Vance saying the Pope shouldn't weigh in on war?
If the Pope was mad at me, and this Pope specifically, I would die. And if my own priest, right, was mad at me, I would feel or disappointed in me.
Yeah.
That would be the worst.
Oh,
but
yeah,
if
disappointed dad.
the Pope was mad at me, I would just be I'd pack it in. I'd be that's it. I gotta go.
Yeah. I mean, we've all accused, I think, J.D. Vance of sort of selling his political soul to get into Donald Trump's graces and do anything for power, but he's really going literal
Doubling down here. But I think, speaking of J.D. Vance, of someone who grew up on the margins and has completely had his brain sucked out and forgotten where he comes from, right? This, for me, I think is also really important for us to talk about why these programs matter, right? I'm a kid who, moved to the community of St. Louis Park, where I still live with my family. My mom had a Section 8 housing voucher, and that's how she did it. That's how we paid the rent. SNAP, which back in the day we called food stamps, was how we kept food on the table. I was that kid with the different colored lunch ticket. And Medicaid, or what's known as medical assistance in Minnesota, was what kept me alive. I missed a lot of school. I was sometimes in the hospital more than I was out in elementary school. And so I am alive because of those programs. And when I think about, my mom, she worked so hard. And she went back to school and was able to do so because of the child care assistance program. She went back to school. She got her certificate in phlebotomy. So she's a professional vampire, as we like to say. And I remember when she walked across the stage and she got her diploma. She was in like a bright blue cap and gown. And it felt like I was walking across that stage. All of those investments helped to lift my family towards the middle class. And now I get to pay that forward and pay it back in service. That's what we have to talk about, right? And for children, our seniors, people who don't make enough money to qualify, right, for or get healthcare through their employer, we can't forget about people. And that, I think, is what I hope still makes us Minnesotans and still makes us Americans, is that we care about each other and that we're going to wrap our arms around you when you need help. And then you're going to pay that back. And that, I think, is one of the things that's just completely missing from this conversation.
Just hearing you talk, I hear, I can tell you worked for Paul Wellstone. I mean, odds are you did if you're in Minnesota politics, right? For those who don't know who Paul Wellstone was, I mean, truly one of the most inspiring people in political life when I was sort of like coming up in politics and working on the Hill. I desperately wanted to work for him. He was killed tragically. Can you just talk about Paul Wellstone, what he meant to you, like kind of how he shaped your career in the course of Minnesota politics?
I mean, I exist because of Paul Wellstone. I was literally driving past the Wellstone for Senate office in 2002, my senior year of college at the University of Minnesota. And I was like, you know what? I like Paul Wellstone. Like, I'm just going to stop.
Really? Just popped in?
Just popped in. And a guy named, now I know as my friend Chris, was like, hey, are you here to volunteer? And I was like, oh, I guess. Sure. Okay. Yeah. And I stuffed envelopes, which isn't really a thing we do anymore.
I remember
but
that, yeah.
I stuffed envelopes for 2 hours with like complete strangers. And I was like, this is amazing. And I went back every single day. And so I started off doing, tasks that just needed to be done. And then ended up leading our urban native organizing work, which, as you know, is how things happen on campaigns, mm-hmm. right?
Suddenly you're running the thing.
Exactly.
If you're good, here's more work.
That's right. And so, I was so moved by that experience and really just like seeing real people and everybody felt like that's our guy, right? Paul's our guy. He's our senator. If it's the Native community, the Somali community, folks up on the Iron Range, like everybody claimed him. And it was because he spent time with people all over the state and really like listened to them and met them and cared for them. And that is, when we talk about politics the Wellstone way, right? That's what it's about. It's about making sure that you're meeting people where they're at, and that the policies that you push for are directly informed by the people who are most impacted. And I remember this moment when, after he had died, and Walter Mondale, former vice president, was running in his place. And so we had to hand make a bunch of signs. And I had marker all over my arm, and it was like hot in the back room. And it was, and I looked around the room, and it was full of people from all different walks of life. And I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I didn't think at the time at all that it meant run for political office. I just thought it meant like I'm going to be part of campaigns and organizing work. And then I was taken under the wing of a lot of Wellstone campaign folks and worked at Wellstone Action for almost a decade afterwards, training people, tens of thousands of people across the country to run for political office.
That's great. If people want to have their own Wellstone moment, working for you? Where do they go? How can they do it?
Sure, folks can visit peggyflanagan.com. We'd love to have you on Team Peggy. It's going to take all of us.